216 BC. In a single afternoon, over 70,000 Roman soldiers were slaughtered. Not over a campaign, not over a year. One day, trapped shoulder to shoulder, surrounded on every side, they could barely raise their swords as Hannibal's army closed the circle tighter and tighter. Standards fell, consuls died, the sand turned red. An entire generation of Rome's fighting men vanished into dust at a little-known place called Cannae. The survivors were so traumatized, some refused to speak about it for the rest of their lives. And the craziest part? Rome still won. This is the history of the Roman Empire, featuring the worst military disaster ever. Rome began as basically nothing, a muddy little settlement beside the Tiber River in central Italy. No giant army, no emperor, no marble palaces, just farmers, bandits, and a suspicious number of stories involving wolves. According to Roman legend, the city was founded in 753 BC by Romulus, who immediately murdered his twin brother, which, honestly, set the tone for the next 1,000 years. Because Rome's story is not a clean rise from village to empire. It is messy, violent, political, and weirdly effective. At first, Rome was ruled by kings. But eventually, the Romans got tired of monarchy, overthrew their last king, and created something revolutionary: the Roman Republic. Instead of one ruler, power was supposed to be split between elected officials, senators, and generals, at least in theory. However, in reality, it was often rich people yelling at each other while poor people fought wars. But somehow, the system worked surprisingly well. Rome conquered neighboring tribes, then rival cities, then most of Italy. Every victory brought more land, more soldiers, more roads, more enemies, and more ambition. This tiny village that shouldn't have mattered was becoming the most dangerous power on the Italian peninsula. But expansion has a way of attracting attention. And eventually, Rome ran into someone much older, much richer, and much scarier. Across the sea, controlling trade, ships, and wealth, stood the great city of Carthage. Carthage was rich, extremely rich. While Rome was still becoming Rome, Carthage was already dominating the Mediterranean with merchant fleets, gold, ports, colonies, and warships. If Rome was a hungry street fighter learning how to survive in the mud, Carthage was a global corporation with war elephants. And then came Hannibal Barca. Instead of attacking Rome from the sea like a normal enemy, Hannibal decided to march an army over the Alps with elephants. In winter, it was completely insane. Men froze. Horses fell. Mountains swallowed entire columns. But Hannibal came through. And when he entered Italy, Rome realized this was not just another war. Then Hannibal started winning. Over and over and over again. Roman armies broke, standards fell, villages burned, and the Senate panicked. And then came 216 BC Cannae. Rome deployed around 80,000 soldiers, one of the largest armies it had ever assembled. They marched in dense, confident formations, convinced that sheer weight would crush Hannibal once and for all. But Hannibal had designed a trap so effective that military academies still study it over 2,000 years later. He let the Roman center push forward. His line bent backward on purpose. The Romans surged in deeper, thinking they were winning. Then the flanks closed. The trap snapped shut. Suddenly, the Roman army was surrounded. Men were crushed, shoulder to shoulder, packed so tightly they could barely lift their swords. For hours, Hannibal's soldiers methodically butchered one of the greatest armies on earth. Eagles fell into the mud. Shields broke. The battlefield disappeared beneath bodies. Around 70,000 Romans died. This is where most ancient empires collapse. But Rome refused to quit. The Senate stayed in session. Boys trained as soldiers. Old men took up weapons. Blacksmiths worked without stopping. Rome became obsessed with endurance. And then Scipio Africanus took the war directly to Carthage. At Zama, Hannibal finally lost. Rome had survived its worst nightmare. Then Rome exploded outward. Spain, Greece, Egypt, Gaul, the Middle East. Roads, aqueducts, cities, arenas, armies, laws. But success created a new enemy, Rome itself. Roman fought Roman. Julius Caesar marched on Rome, crossed the Rubicon, seized power, and then got stabbed 23 times. The Republic was dead. Augustus rose from the chaos, and the Roman Empire began. At its peak, Rome ruled from Britain to Egypt, but it never stopped being violent. Emperors were poisoned, assassinated, replaced, and sometimes completely insane. One allegedly even made his horse a government official. During the 200s AD, Rome nearly collapsed again. Civil wars, economic disaster, plagues, invasions. The empire cracked. Constantine changed everything, raising Christianity into power and transforming Rome forever. And by the 400s AD, the Western Roman Empire was exhausted. The empire that had once dominated the Mediterranean was now struggling to hold itself together under its own weight. Its economy had weakened. Its cities were shrinking. Its armies relied more and more on mercenaries, men who fought for pay rather than loyalty to Rome. Political corruption spiraled. Emperors rose and fell, and the old machinery of Roman power began to break apart. Then came wave after wave of invasions. The Visigoths, the Vandals, the Huns. Across the frontiers, pressure built from every direction. Roman forts burned. Refugees filled the roads. Soldiers retreated from borders that Rome had defended for centuries. And then, in 410 AD, something happened that once seemed impossible. Rome itself was sacked for the first time in nearly 800 years. The city that had conquered kingdoms, destroyed Carthage, humbled Greece, and ruled from Britain to Egypt was now burning. The psychological shock was enormous. To many Romans, it felt like the world itself was ending. But the empire staggered on for a few more decades, weaker each year, until 476 AD, when the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was removed from power. No grand final battle, no glorious last stand, just a young emperor pushed aside and a crown falling into dust. Traditionally, this marks the fall of the Western Roman Empire. But technically, Rome did not fully die. In the East, Constantinople still stood. The Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, carried Roman law, Roman identity, and Roman imperial tradition forward for nearly another 1,000 years. Its walls guarded the eastern Mediterranean. Its armies still marched under the legacy of Rome. Its emperors still called themselves Roman. Until, finally, in 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottomans. And with that, the last living continuation of the Roman Empire came to an end, which means Rome lasted, in one form or another, for over 2 millennia, from a muddy village beside a river to one of the largest empires in history. From wolves beside the Tiber, to Hannibal in the Alps, to the nightmare at Cannae, to Caesar, the Colosseum, burning cities, and the last defenders of Constantinople. And somehow, despite disasters that should have destroyed it, Rome kept enduring, again, and again, and again. Maybe that is the real story of Rome. Not that it conquered the world, but that it survived things that should have killed it. And the day 70,000 Romans died in an afternoon might have been the moment that taught the empire how. Under Simplified Timelines. Subscribe for more Under Simplified Timelines.